Hello and welcome. Today we'll have a look at narcissistic financial abuse. In the previous videos, we looked at how every relationship has some kind of fantasy going on. And in a family dynamic, the main idea of that fantasy is default control, because parents are the supreme order and then the children are under the parents' control. When we look at love, romantic, marital relationships, then the fantasy shifts a little because the control, it has to be consensual. But then in other cases where one party is the least fortunate, then by default they fall under the control of the one who is domineering as well as resourceful. So I just want to lay that foundation so that we have a clear understanding of how the finances then come into play. The way in which finances play out, particularly when the narcissist is well aware of their narcissism and they're doing it deliberately, then everything is highly calculative, well planned, and predetermined. I want to bring your attention to the fact that there are some people who could be narcissists unknowingly, okay? There are some people who could be portraying those personality traits and behaviors ignorantly, all right? I think it's crucial for us to acknowledge that, because it helps us then filter out the kind of situation and the kind of individual that we are dealing with. So let's take, for example, the one that is ignorant of their narcissistic behavior and they are not aware and they don't mean it. And if it were to be brought up to their attention, they would definitely be willing to change. So such a person is someone who is probably empathetic themselves, someone who is probably a very sincere and pure soul. And upon realizing their fault, they would most definitely change their ways. And once their partner, if it's a marital relationship, or once if the child in the parent relationship expresses their grievance, then the narcissist would be like, I wasn't aware that's how I'm making you feel. I didn't realize that my action or this kind of thing is making you feel that way. I am sorry. And then they change that. So that is like a dream scenario for every human being. If people were like that, the world would be a better place. And then let's then dive into the most common narcissistic personality that we see. So this is someone who is conniving, absolutely cunning, who's well aware of what they're doing, and they do it anyway, and they play dumb. This is the narcissist. I want us to understand and psychically analyze why they use finances to oppress their target or victim. So in the family unit, this kind of narcissist, by virtue of being a parent in most cases, or an older sibling, or a relative, of course, it always has to do with age. Age is always a factor. It's only in marital relationships whereby it is spousal narcissistic abuse where you find the bucking of heads. But in the Christian dynamic, age is always a factor. The least is always treated the worst. So with that kind of dynamic going on, we find that by virtue of parents having the upper hand and the resources and being up in age and older, then they control and they exert themselves whichever way they want on their subjects. Because of course, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? If you dare object me, if you dare stand up for yourself, try to tell me grievances you have against how I treat you, or on my character or personality or whatever, then you're just gonna get the worst kind of treatment. You're gonna have your privileges taken away from you. You're gonna have your livelihood threatened. So that is the experience of a child who's dealing with a narcissist, and that is how the finances play out. And remember, resources have to do with our survival, our existence. They pose an existential crisis upon a person. This then becomes a very big problem because we all want to be safe. No one wants their survival to be threatened or livelihood at stake. No one wants their safety, their shelter to just be taken away from them in a blink of an eye. Although children do not express their concern for survival, but it is an innate knowing that I may be homeless. It's an innate safety threat that they know. It's an unspoken threat that they know to protect by complying, to protect by adhering to whatever rule is set before them, be it good or bad. It is just the most terrifying thing for a child, because although the child may not express outwardly that they feel threatened and scared, but at the same time they need the home, they need the provision, they need the food and all that stuff. They need to please the parent whichever way possible and whatever that may be, so that they do not fall out of their good graces, because children know that if they fall out of their parents' good graces, there are gonna be certain outcomes for that. And so it is just the most terrifying thing. I think it's worse for children than it is for adults. At least adults are higher up in age. They're able to make decisions for themselves and seek help, and they have access to so much information and the technology that is out there. They can actually try and get help for themselves. But for children, it is just devastating. The parents use their financial muscle to keep everyone in line, keep everyone in check, make sure that everyone plays their unspoken role perfectly and stays within the good graces of the parent. Okay, now let's move on to young adults and adults in general. Typically, young adults and adults find themselves in romantic relationships, marital relationships with narcissists. Again, resources play a big factor, because if I feed you, if I take care of you, in other cases, you may be even working. Both of you may be working. But then, by virtue of maybe gender, the narcissist is just going to want to be over-domineering over you, and they will want to control you and just show you how helpless you are because they are above you. You see, with a narcissist, it's not always about one single factor. They use anything and everything that they can use against you. So if the two of you are working in the household, then it's going to be a thing of gender. And if it's not a thing of gender, then they are going to use the thing of, well, whose family is better or whose career is better. So narcissists are just psychopaths that are obsessed with one-upmanship. They always have to one-up the other person. It's a constant fight of power, control, and competition. They're always competing with you. They're always measuring themselves by you, measuring their success, comparing it to someone else's success. That is just the order of the day when you're dealing with a narcissist. Right. Moving swiftly along to understanding the original concept of this financial abuse. Let us refer to the Bible in Genesis, the beginning of creation. When God created Adam and Eve, He made them and gave them dominion over the earth. He told them, subdue. He told them, replenish and multiply. Okay? And when Eve was tempted in the garden, what was the after effect of the temptation? It was to cause her to forfeit her God-given resources. When Adam and Eve were placed and created by God in the Garden of Eden, God gave them everything that was in front of them, even things that God had not even given to them or placed before their sight. It was theirs. In Genesis, we learn that Adam and Eve were born rich. They were born wealthy. They were born into wealth. As soon as they opened their eyes, everything was before them. There was food, plenty of animals, plenty of vegetation. There was splendor and abundance everywhere. There were resources everywhere, right? So, this is a clear indication of how important resources are, and it also shows God's original design for us, God's original plan for humanity. God did not create us to suffer. God did not create us to be begging and, seeking help. God did not create us to just be suffering all the time, toiling. There's even a verse that says, I give you riches without toil, because that's how God is, He takes care of His own. God would not have, if you look at the flow of creation, God created everything that they would need and then created them. So do you see how important resources are? Because God is an abundant God. God is a loving and most beneficial God. So the original concept of financial weaponry comes from Satan, because that is his biggest tool towards humanity. If you think about it, some of the most dire cases of abuse, of life-threatening situations, they all stem from poverty. They all stem from desperation and lack and insufficiency. What is it that drives a person to be a thief? It is poverty. What is it that drives a person to be willing to kill another human being in order for gain? What is it that drives someone else to sell illegal organs? It is all about resources. So this is where the original concept of weaponizing finances comes from. It's not something new. It's not something that's just trending because now everyone is talking about narcissism. No, it is as old as creation, because the first person who stripped humanity of resources is who? The devil, okay, in the Garden of Eden. And he did this in a subtle way, because he knew that when they violate God's precepts or God's law, then they will forfeit of their benefits. They will forfeit of their resources. Hence, they were led out of the Garden of Eden and they were shut out, and they just had to live in the land of their enemy. They had to now live a life that was substandard to what God had originally planned for them. And so when we take that example as template and we bring it to now the physical side, we look at how narcissism operates. We see that wealth is weaponized. Resources are weaponized so that one gets disoriented, fragmented, displaced, and just absolutely dysfunctional, thrown off their path, thrown off their quality of life. And this only invites many other problems. So I've covered the consent aspect, which was talking about relationship dynamics and the fantasies thereof. We then moved on to how finances get weaponized. And now I want us to look at isolation and helplessness. What happens is that because of the relationship fantasy that you may be under, so if you're a child, you're still under the care of your parents, this means that when you stand up for yourself, they will begin to run their smear campaign on you, which will isolate you from the community that you've always known. It's going to isolate you from your religious group, your family and relatives, because you have this grievance that is serious to you. But because the narcissist is the superior power, they're the one whose voice is heard and listened to. They're the one who have just, an authority and a better leg to stand on in all of these groups of people, then you get isolated and no one avails themselves to help you. No one comes up to even lend you an ear to hear you out. Why? That's because in the narcissistic parent-child relationship, the parent has already laid the foundation. The parent has already painted this facade of themselves. So when you come up with a grievance, it's just going to be unbelievable and dismissed. This then leads to helplessness. This helplessness causes one to not know where to turn and what to do. It further isolates the target or the victim into a corner, and that is how most people end up being depressed, being bipolar, taking medicine for anxiety and all those things, because abuse is very isolating, particularly when you try to speak up and you are shot down, ignored, or ridiculed. Then it just sends you off into isolation and helplessness. Similarly with adults, be it a romantic relationship or in the work environment or in any other dynamic, when you are an adult experiencing narcissism from someone that is superior, someone that is obviously the resourceful one, then speaking up for yourself becomes a problem, and it's threatening. It's life threatening in the sense that it threatens your livelihood. Hence, a lot of people just decide to accept it and they live with it and they take all the punches, be it physical or emotional, spiritual, psychological punches. A lot of adults just figure out that, you know what, I might as well accept it. This is how the way things are for me, and I do not have any other choice. And so this then becomes a problem because it makes your nervous system very sick to stay under unfavorable conditions. People fall ill, they wind up mentally dysfunctional, and if not dead in some cases. So I just wanted to share the importance of understanding financial abuse, as well as the importance of being financially independent. That's the part I didn't mention on the introduction. But I believe that having mentioned all these things which are problematic, it's vital to end on a positive note, which is, if you are a young person and you are seeing signs of narcissistic abuse in your life, be it in a family dynamic or a relationship dynamic, it's important for you to quietly and just privately start preparing yourself, start saving up money, start creating that financial independence, which will help you in times of need, which will rescue you whenever things get really bad and you cannot take it anymore. The biggest problem with narcissism is that it hits people when they least expect it. It hits people in a way that they didn't see coming. So it is important for us to make the most of things while we still have a chance. So if you are working, it doesn't matter where you may be working, as long as you're earning an income. Save as much as you can. Even if you are a student and your parents give you or your guardians give you some money, just save as much as you can, because people are crazy and the world has turned into something. Well, it's always been weird, but it's just that spiritually there's a big shift, and things have become unbearable. Situations have become unbearable, and a lot of things have been happening that are causing narcissism now to be on the rise. The pushback is also on the rise. So it is therefore important to prepare oneself. And remember, as I mentioned in the other video, when you are dealing with a narcissist, they need to be absolutely unaware of your move. They need to stay in the dark. They need to be clueless about anything that you're doing concerning yourself, such as your financial independence. Because Resources are the biggest weapon of warfare in narcissism. Everything is about resources. For now, I am just laying the foundation of narcissism based on our physical experience. But when I get into the spiritual stuff, that is when you're going to understand how deep this is. So it is all about resources. It has always been about resources. And when you strip people of their resources, then you can control them, then you can manipulate them to get into bigger trouble, to do many more things that are going to be detrimental to them, and essentially just get people to live a substandard life, a life that is going to be below the quality of life that God had originally blessed them with. I hope that this message blesses you and it has given you an understanding of how resources are weaponized. I wish you all well, and I will catch you on the next one. Bye.